All right.
Let's, I guess, to get started, I guess if you would, state your name and your job title and basically what it is you do for New Hartford PD there.
Okay. My first name is Timothy. My middle name is Patrick.
Mm-hmm.
Last name is O'Neill, capital O, apostrophe, capital N-E-I-L-L.
Okay.
My rank is lieutenant. I'm with the New Hartford Police Department in New Hartford, New York, which, just to give you some idea, is located basically between Syracuse and Albany if you're on the thruway.
Okay.
I've been with the police department for 32 years. The lieutenant's number 2 position there.
Quite the experience then, huh?
Yeah, I got a lot of time on the job.
Okay. Well, listen, man, I think that basically you've been filled in on the reason that I contacted you and the reason why I'm calling. I'm pretty sure that just about everybody in the country is familiar with it by now. But there was a story of I would call him a child. I think he was, around 19?
Yeah. Lucas Leonard, 19 years old.
Okay. And if you don't mind, just take me back to the beginning, or how you guys actually made the initial contact, and how you came about getting the call for the incident.
Well, it was October 12th, this past Monday.
Mm-hmm.
About 12:30 p.m., a hospital that sits within the town of New Hartford, St. Luke's Memorial Hospital, called 911 to report that a gunshot victim had been brought into the hospital. So we immediately responded our cars up to that location. There was distraught family members there, and it was kind of a chaotic scene. We got up there, and at that time, we went and checked on the victim, and we find out that he had passed away. I don't know at that particular time if he had made it into the hospital alive and died, or he was determined to be dead upon his arrival at the hospital. So I had my officers up there. They're trying to interview the parents at that time, who are Bruce and Deborah Leonard. Mm-hmm. And they weren't getting real good cooperation, which struck us a little odd. And they had brought their son in. He didn't come in an ambulance. He was actually brought in a private vehicle, which, once again, was a little unusual.
Right.
And there were a couple other members present at the time. Turns out one was, I'm sorry.
That's okay. When you say a couple of members, you're referring to members of the church, of the congregation?
Yeah, I was just going to explain that.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go
members
ahead.
Of their church, and it turned out that one was Tracy Irwin, mm-hmm. and just for your records, it's TraciIrwin. It's Tracy Irwin, and her daughter Tiffany Irwin, with the spelling of Tiffanie, and turns out they were representatives from the church that the Leonard family belonged to, which turned out to be the Word of Life Christian Church, located at 3354 Oneida Street in Chavix, New York. And Chavix is a hamlet that sits wholly within the town of New Hartford. Okay. You okay with me giving these details as I go, or would you rather just tell me tell the story?
No, man, I absolutely, yeah, I'm enjoying it. So this is what we want. Go ahead, it's fine.
Okay, so as we started to conduct the interviews and try to get a handle on this, obviously the first thing we got is we have a body with apparent gunshot wound. We need to find the crime scene. Mm-hmm. We need to know details. And the family and the 2 members of the church were not very forthright or forthcoming with any information. In the course of interviewing the 4 of these individuals, were able to at least come to the conclusion that either the shooting took place at the family residence, which is 2347 Main Street in Clayville, New York, which is actually in the town of Paris outside of our jurisdiction, mm-hmm. or it took place at the Word of Life Church, which I already gave the address. So we immediately asked for the state police to assist us in this investigation because we weren't sure where this was headed. If the death had been caused in Clayville, that would have been a state police case. If it had been caused in New Hartford, it would be our case. But at that point, we joined our forces and put all our assets together and made the decision that no matter where it occurred, we would do this together. So we started working this investigation. We immediately sent several police cars out to the Clayville home to secure that as a crime scene. And we sent many cars down to the Word of Life Church compound. It's got a high fence around it, locked gates. It's not generally open to the public as you would think a church might be.
Right.
So we took control of those two locations, and my order was at that time that nobody in, anybody coming out, bring them in. And as this investigation continued, we were interviewing Bruce Leonard, we were interviewing his wife Deborah Leonard, once again not being forthcoming at all, really being very elusive, if you will, with information. Now remember, these are the parents of the dead boy. It makes it a little challenging for us to try to figure out, why we're not getting these answers. I mean,
right.
You would expect, these distraught parents to want whoever killed their child brought to justice and be, over the top, maybe even demanding of us to do things. But these people were very much just the opposite. So obviously, you don't have to be a genius to realize this raised our suspicions considerably about these two individuals.
Right.
We attempted to do an interview with Tracy Irwin, and she did meet with our officers and did give a statement, but it wasn't really very enlightening at all. She just, basically kind of gave us an outline of the church, and she did identify the Leonards as being a family that was, a part of the church for a long time, and they're all members, and to include the deceased boy. Mm-hmm. So went to interview Tiffany Irwin, and that time she declined to give a statement to us or have any conversations regarding this.
Really?
So, just kind of do the math there. You start to see we eventually were able to get our hands on another member of the church, and that was Joseph Irwin. Mm-hmm. And he is the son of Tracy and the brother of Tiffany. Now, we had conversations with him about what went on. At that time, we started writing search warrant applications to get into the church to obviously try to find and secure our crime scene. As this investigation went on, we discovered that there was another brother, Christopher Leonard, who was 17 years old, that had also been involved in whatever caused the death of Lucas Leonard. Mm-hmm. At that point, I think I need to clarify for you. In the first couple of hours, we were able to determine that there was not a gunshot wound to this boy as originally thought by the hospital. Through examining his body, we found several other holes, and we realized that it appeared that all his injuries were caused by blunt force trauma, that he had been beaten, kicked, and struck with objects, and had some really horrific injuries. So it was easy to see where the mistake could be made. That it looked like he had been shot. So, but as this investigation goes on, we're still thinking there's someone out there with a gun.
Right.
So now we know we have Christopher Leonard out there. We need to find him because we've learned that he was also subject to these beatings. So we eventually sent a SWAT team down to the Leonard house in Clayville, and they made an entry, and nobody was there. So at least we didn't have to continue to hold that as a crime scene anymore. We focused all our time, attention, and resources on Word of Life Church. Mm-hmm. As the investigation progressed, we were able to get some names of other members within the church and we got some of their family members to make phone calls, and we eventually got another brother, Daniel Irwin, to come out of the building. And he was interviewed with police. And he was quite cooperative, actually. He gave us a lot of information, and we started hearing this talk about a counseling session. And now I can tell you what a counseling session is. Back then we were still learning about it. But a counseling session is a practice or a ritual or a process that goes on within the church. And it's been regularly used for years within the church to address the spirituality of certain members or to, reconcile certain sins. And the way that they are brought together is usually after a church service on a Sunday. Pastor Tiffany would call for a counseling session if she felt there needed to be some corrective interventions. So after the service on Sunday, October 11th, Pastor Tiffany calls for this counseling session. So we know that this counseling session was called specifically for the Leonard family to address Lucas and Christopher Leonard. At the time, we're not sure what the issues were. So this counseling session is initiated with the Leonard family and members of the Word of Life Church.
Now, I did hear some stories about, and I don't know if this is true or if you can confirm this, but one of the statements that I read on another news site was that this 19-year-old that was killed was actually making plans to leave the church and go into the Army.
Well, yeah, you're ahead of me, but that we'll get there.
Okay.
So what happens now is, and I'm going to be kind of moving back and forth on the timeline because you hear one thing here and then you find something out later that dispels it. So
right.
I want to go back to the hospital now when we first got called up there because this is going to be a very interesting part of what you just mentioned.
Okay.
The father, as the boy was being treated by hospital staff, and our officers were going up there and having their initial interviews, kept saying that his son, Lucas, was a pedophile and a child molester. Obviously, we didn't share this with the public. We didn't want that to be out there. But it eventually leaked out here and there. Now, that was the first, that's what we heard initially. So at that time, it appeared to us that this boy, I shouldn't call him a boy, he was a young man, received these extensive beatings because of these beliefs that he had been a child molester. And
right.
the rumor attached to that was that he had just raped this 2-year-old little girl. And of course, we're all like, oh my God, come on. Now, but we're going like, okay, now we got to find this 2-year-old girl. We're trying to find 17-year-old Christopher. I mean, there was a lot of things starting to really build some momentum here about our need to get into the church.
Right.
And, writing search warrants applications are not easy. And, you have to have probable cause to even make application. You have to articulate specific crimes and specific things that you're looking for. And it's a very tedious and long-going process. So, this is now beginning to happen, kind of like in the background by one group of people, where we have many, many investigators interviewing these other church members and former church members, and it's a lot about gathering information and then trying to assess that information and start connecting the dots and putting the puzzle together to see what the heck is going on.
Right.
So the long story short is we get to the point where Daniel Irwin gives us statements that basically says, yes, there was a counseling session. Yes, it was for the Leonard family. Yes, mother and father and sister Sarah Ferguson were involved with it. And yes, Lucas Leonard and Christopher Leonard were the subject of that. And yes, they were being beaten by the family. And we also believed at that time some other church members. But we weren't getting all that information so much about the other people. But now we at least know that Mr. and Mrs. Leonard and their daughter Sarah participated in the beatings of their two boys. Mm-hmm. Now, the interesting thing is, according to Daniel, this starts about 8 o'clock on Sunday night, this counseling session within the church sanctuary. And they beat these boys from 8 o'clock Sunday night to about 10 o'clock Monday morning. Think about that, 14 hours.
Wow.
The beating stopped because Lucas died. That's according to Irwin's statement. There's still a lot of work to be done here because obviously I told you in the beginning at 12:30 we're going to the hospital, and this guy's saying that at 10 o'clock in the morning they think he's succumbed to his injuries. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of things that's still yet to be resolved. This is an ongoing investigation. But, right. The things I'm able to tell you now, I kind of told you 5 days ago because we couldn't share, but a lot of this is out because of the felony exam yesterday.
Right.
And it's public record because every media outlet in the world was sitting there yesterday and got all this firsthand. So to go back to the story of that night, we eventually developed enough information. We get contacts inside the church, and we finally are able to talk to the people inside and convince them to come out. So I want to say maybe midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. I can't remember exactly now. Mm-hmm. We have 3 adults and 7 children come out of the building. And, of course, I was working at that time. I was working in the command post right at the lead desk with my state police counterparts. And, we notified the SWAT teams, notified our uniformed officers on scene, hey, you're going to have 7 children and 3 adults coming out, handle them, be careful. Everybody came out, we searched and everything. Everybody we took out earlier, Joseph and Daniel, we searched, and then these people. And who we had come out of the building was a woman by the name of Linda Morey, which is Morey, and Christopher Leonard, who we've been looking for, so we were very relieved to find him. His sister, Sarah Ferguson, who we were looking for at that point, and the 7 children who we were trying to identify. Escapes me now, but at some point we also encountered and took with us a David Morey, who is the son of Linda Morey. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure when he came on. I'm sorry, it just escapes me at this point. But through the course of the evening, so the children we brought over to the Willowdale Firehouse, which is a local fire company that protects this area, Chadwick's. And we had Linda Morey at that point. We weren't sure what her role was, but her name hadn't come up. Stay with the children. And, of course, we had police guards on that. Right. We brought everybody else back, and they were all interviewed. And we were able to finally piece together what happened. And I already told you some of that story that this counseling session went on. And we were able to identify some other church members that participated in the beatings of the boys. So at that point, we had enough to get our search warrant. We had the SWAT teams execute the search warrants down there. They were able to gain entry without incident. They secured the buildings. We had the state police forensic investigation unit and the New Hartford police forensic units go in, and they did processed the crime scene, took all the photos, gathered all the evidence and everything. And we held the compound for about another 48 hours. You can hang on to it as long as you want, but once you let go, it's gone. Right. We wanted to await the results of the autopsies to find out if there's other things we needed to look for. So we basically had that 24/7 coverage. 24 hours a day. It wasn't 7 days, obviously. Right. At the same time, now we got Christopher Leonard, who, as they began to interview him, realized that he had been severely beaten. And once the investigating officers saw the extent of his injuries, which were almost identical to the injuries that his brother Lucas had, they called the ambulance and transported him to the hospital. and he's been in the hospital now since that night, and he was in very serious condition initially, and he's been serious all week, and just yesterday he was finally moved up to, I don't know, I guess you could say guarded. You know, it's one step below stable, yeah, right, whatever works for you. And so, but we've been in contact with Christopher throughout the week. Now, Christopher's been very forthcoming, and he gave us a great deal of information and named names and people and everything was happening. So that allowed us to build a criminal case against Bruce and Deborah Irwin, and they were charged with manslaughter in the first degree for the death of their son, Lucas. Mm-hmm. And we were also able to make a criminal case against Sarah Ferguson, David Morey, Linda Morey, and Joseph Irwin for the beatings of Christopher Irwin. And they were arrested and charged with assault second. Okay. Now, that night, well, actually, it was the early morning hours of Tuesday, October 13th, that they were arraigned in New Hartford court before the Honorable Judge William Verkler. And the Leonards, Mr. and Mrs. Leonard, were both remanded to, that night they were all remanded to United County Jail with no bail. The next day, a bail hearing was heard in New Hartford Town Court, and at that time, they had their court-appointed attorneys, and there was a bunch of back and forth between the court and the attorneys, and the judge ultimately decided to set bail for Mr. and Mrs. Leonard, Bruce and Deborah, at $100,000 cash each, and the other four suspects at $50,000 each. And they were sent back to jail. Now, yesterday, the 16th of October at 1 o'clock is what we call a felony exam. Up here in the state of New York, the criminal cases are prosecuted within each county. And the way it works is the towns and villages are what we call local criminal courts. And they have initial jurisdiction in any case that the crime was committed within your jurisdiction. And you would bring the people you arrest before that court and have them arraigned. Now, when people are charged with felonies and they're put in jail on bail or without bail, they're entitled to what is called a felony exam. And the district attorney office has 144 hours to conduct this felony exam. So that was scheduled for 1 o'clock yesterday afternoon. Now, that is a process that specifically addresses whether or not there's probable cause to believe that a crime was committed that a felony was committed and that the people in custody are the ones who, in fact, committed that crime. And it's up to the people, the district attorney's office, to provide the evidence and the testimony to demonstrate that, in fact, these people are the ones who committed the crime, and this is the crime they committed, and here are the facts and the testimony to support that. So the way the courtroom went yesterday is that the David Morey and his mother, Linda Morey, have been bailed out. So they just appeared before the court very quickly to have conditions set, and their next appearance date was set for December 16th for the two of them. And then they were allowed, matter of fact, they just stayed in the back of the court for the rest of it because they were no longer in police custody or the custody of the county jail.
So now, I'm sorry, so quick question. Are they actually, is there any type of monitoring or supervision for these two individuals while they're out on bail, like house arrest or anything like that, or are they just basically kind of have free reign?
They're out on bail. You know, they get instructions from the court, like, you know, don't leave the state, don't go on the country, you know, those kind of things.
Right.
But, yeah, they're pretty much free to move about the public as they wish.
Okay. Okay.
So the next two people that came into court and had their hearing was Joseph Irwin and Sarah Ferguson. And at that time, well, in both cases, the people, the district attorney, Don Catera-Lupi, had made a motion. It's called the 18080 that says, it's in the CPL, that if your witness in a felony is in the hospital in a condition that he's not capable of coming and appearing to give his testimony, they can get an adjournment until which time this individual is capable. Okay. So that 18080 section was used, and the judge, put a stay on the hearing, which extends that time out from the 144 hours I was talking about earlier. And the Sarah Ferguson and Joseph Burr were then taken back to jail, and they'll continue to sit in jail until that time that either someone bails them out, which we don't believe is likely at this point, or if in fact they get their felony exam, and then obviously whatever happens to that would determine the next step.
Right.
So after they were done, then Bruce and Deborah Leonard were brought in for their felony exam. And at that time, witnesses were produced to include Daniel Merlin. Evidence was entered, photographs of the beaten boy's body. And testimony was given by the investigators. And it took hours. So I'm going to really cut to the chase and say, at the end, after much discussion between the attorneys and the judges and the district attorney and the judge ruled that there was sufficient cause to hold these people over, and he retained his bail at $100,000 each. Excuse me. And subsequently, they were returned back to Oneida County Jail. So there you are in kind of a nutshell, but there's some real important points I want to focus on right now, Dustin, to make sure that it's clear before you put anything out on the internet. Mm-hmm. The allegations of being child molesters against these two boys is totally unfounded. And I can tell you that now because of a couple of things that we did. We're the number one believers and supporters of the Constitution in this country. We adhere to it more carefully. We have a greater understanding and knowledge of it than any layperson.
Man, I think, and I think you've got a valid point, and I think a lot of times, and this was something that I wanted to touch on or ask you about as well. It's situations like this, especially anytime you have a death or a controversial situation like this, it tends to divide the community. You usually have one half that feels one way and one half that feels another. And like you mentioned, there are some people who think that, we should just go in these people's houses and places of business and basically monitor everything that they do. So how has this affected your community and your department and the friends and relatives of the victim?
Well, for my department, this has been, a very, very stressful week, as you might imagine.
Right.
And I think for all involved, the injuries these two boys suffered were absolutely horrific. Absolutely horrific. They were beaten so severely, obviously, caused the death of one and serious, serious injuries. And these boys were beaten. I have to kind of give you a map of where the injuries were. I'd say from your upper abdomen down to your upper thighs and all through there, to include the buttocks, the genitals, the back. And they were beaten with fists, feet. They were struck repeatedly what I would refer to as like a cord, something with a plug on the end of it. Mm-hmm. And they were being, flogged with that. And when you look, it is just so horrifying. When obviously you're not going to get to see the pictures of these boys, but I did.
Right.
Seeing the amount and the extent of these injuries to the bodies. I believe this injuries, this Christopher, he may be permanently damaged to some aspects. It's just, they're so severe. Obviously, severe enough that Lucas died from them.
Right.
But it's very, very disturbing. And then when you you try to grasp in your mind that these group of people, including their parents and their sister, beat them for 14 hours. Think about that. 14 hours.
That's a tragedy.
I'll tell you right now. Take a belt and beat it on a table for 14 hours and tell me how long you last. These people have to take rest breaks. They have to take turns.
Right.
I mean, and that's horrific. Now, this is a church. This is a family.
That's the troubling thing. And
oh yeah, if someone did this in their own home, it wouldn't be national news.
Right.
It's the fact that where it was done, how it was done, and possibly under whose direction it was done is what makes this so horrifying. I mean, we look at our churches today. It doesn't matter what the religion is. We look at them as a place of worship and a place of safety and security where people can go for peace and solitude and spiritual support. And these boys, after Sunday service, are beaten to death.
Right. And I think it speaks volumes as well that of how horrific this is, that you guys, as well as the people from the hospital, thought that initially that this young man had a gunshot wound. I mean, when your injuries are that bad that you can't tell what actually caused the wound, then I mean that's a severe beating, you know.
Yeah. Like I said, you conjure up the worst pictures you can in your mind, and you're not going to get there.
Right.
As I've seen it, I can't believe it. Now, as far as the rest of the community, I mean, we have a very supportive community. They're obviously horrified by the whole thing. Once again, I think we're up against that mentality. Well, why didn't the police do something beforehand? I think we just discussed that well enough to understand.
Right.
You know, the Fourth Amendment just doesn't allow us to go trudging into people's houses or churches or anywhere else where we think, they're a little strange, they're a little different, let's go investigate them. That just doesn't work that way. But, you know, beyond that, when you try to talk about, you know, the friends and other family members of the Leonard family, there isn't really a lot of people forthcoming because these people, as a result of being members of this church, were very isolated and didn't really interact a lot within the public realm, especially the children were kept very limited to the friendships and outside interactions they had.
Right.
So it's not like, you know, Joe average kid who's going to the high school ends up getting shot and, you know, there's 500 students outside hugging and kissing and crying and doing candlelight vigils. Because these people just weren't that well known or established within the social network of the community.
So as far, which brings me to my next question, as far as the investigation goes, this was... obviously, there were more people present than the ones that were actually participating in the beating. What was? Did you interview these people? And if you did, what was their reason for not interfering? Were they aware of it, or are there criminal charges that are pending on some of these people? Or
well, this is how it works, Dustin. We have absolute knowledge that Pastor Tiffany. Mm-hmm. Called the counseling session. Normally, she was the one who called for it. Mm-hmm. So she set the stage. We absolutely know Pastor Tiffany was present. If not, throughout, off and on, I get different reports that she, you know, was there and then she'd leave and then she'd come back. So you have this individual who is the church leader and kind of, you know, directing these people spiritually and maybe, you know, telling them what they need to be doing, involved here.
Right.
This is where someone like this that we know is there, but nobody has yet said that she did anything. We'll probably, hopefully, maybe somewhere along the way, we'll learn more from other people that we can maybe make a case about that.
Right.
You know, you just don't know. We know there were other church members present, well, we're having a very hard time finding out who they are. Once again, there is no crystal ball. You only know what people are willing to tell you. The people, we can't make people talk. We can't beat people to make them tell us things.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So I say, Dustin, tell me who was there, and you go, just Tim was there. I mean, no, that's not true.
Right.
So Dustin, you're lying. No, I'm not. Yes, no, I'm not. I mean, you see where you're going?
Right, but until you can prove that, then that's basically where you're at.
Right, but there's also the preponderance of evidence clause when it comes to trying to prove a crime. Mm-hmm. And if you have enough evidence, call it circumstantial evidence, whatever, but if you have enough volume of evidence and you're able to put that in the grand jury and say, look, we don't have the person standing there with the smoking gun in the body at their feet. But what we do have are all these pieces of information, testimony, physical evidence, whatever, that definitely demonstrates that this person was involved in this crime. You put it in the hands of the grand jury. Right. And if they feel that you've established, then they can invoke and do the indictment, and then that person, a warrant's issued and then is arrested. So there is a lot that can still happen. There's a lot that's going to happen. This investigation, even though a lot of it has happened in it as far as people being arrested and preliminary hearings and everything, still has a long way to go. Right, and we're getting good cooperation. I wasn't sure. We put out in the media several times that we're very interested in talking with church members, anybody have any information. And many people have come forward. Matter of fact, because I was assigned after the initial night working, running the investigation, working at the command post and the lead desk, I was then transition. My chief asked me to transition to doing the media relations, and that's why I've been doing all these interviews and orchestrating everything with the media, setting up the press conferences and organizing the court yesterday. And so I really kind of lost touch with all that was going on in the investigation and exactly who's moving forward and what their statements are. But I know the story so well. Like I said, I ran off the addresses of these people's homes and everything, and it's just because. But the new information, the stuff where the former members coming forward and stuff, I don't know what they're telling us. But my understanding from some of the people I talked to is that it isn't really information that puts the church in a good light. Right.
And I guess, and this will most likely be my last question, but as an individual, I've been rather outspoken, especially on our news network, about Christianity, basically radical Christianity, and that seems to me that this is what it was. I wouldn't go so far as to call it a cult, but it's no secret that as a country, and even probably in your community or mine or wherever, that this is not the first time we have lost a child or an innocent person who's been killed due to religious rituals and practices and things like that. What are some of your thoughts on that, and what do you think, if you have any thoughts about regulation on this type of thing?
Well, I'm a true constitutionalist. The Constitution stands, and if you look at the First Amendment, which, I always look at the Constitution in this way.
Right.
Those amendments are, in my opinion, numbered based on the importance to our founding fathers. If you remember, this country was founded primarily by people fleeing their home countries looking for religious freedom. The pilgrims coming over on the Mayflower and subsequent migrations here were basically more about people looking for opportunities to be able to live freely and express their own religious beliefs. Back in those days, religion was a matter of state. It wasn't so much about the individual as it was, you have the Church of England.
Fleeing persecution, basically.
Right. So that's what brought them to this country. And so when you look at our Constitution and our amendments, you look at the First Amendment, religious freedom is right there, big. Freedom of speech, right there. So I would never want to see government trespass on individuals' right to pursue a religious belief, unless, and this is huge, it was based in anything that was so dark, or, like, let's say we have a church of, black magic or something, and these people are doing human sex. Okay, anything that crosses just look at our laws. Our laws are based on protecting people, but outside of that, I'm a Roman Catholic. I'm very comfortable in the structured religious orders, whether it's Episcopalian, Methodist, Presbyterian, Southern Baptist, the Jewish, whatever. Everybody goes to those, and everybody's very comfortable because they're established, they have a hierarchy, they have great history. The self-proclaimed ministers or pastors create their own churches. I think historically is where we find some of our biggest problems. Mm-hmm. And, I can't help but think of David Koresh out there in Waco, Jim Jones down in Jonesboro.
Right.
You look at that and say, wow. And when the government finally had enough information to bring their interest to at least a level of reasonable suspicion where you can start a criminal investigation, you need probable cause to make an arrest, just so you understand. Right. Kind of like you use the theory of a glass of water. If you think of a glass of water, reasonable suspicion is about 20 or 30% full, and probable cause is about 60% full, and beyond a reasonable doubt is like 90% full. Right. So when we start working a case, we're looking at reasonable suspicion. That gets us off the ground. That gets us moving into the investigative mode. If we get to the level of probable,
so to speak. Right.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
The first step, so to speak.
Yeah, that's the first step. It allows us to begin a police investigation. Right. If we get to the probable cause of it, we can make an arrest or get search warrants. Mm-hmm. Once we make our arrest, then it's up to the prosecuting's office to take all the things that we've gathered as a result of their arrest and then put it before a jury and prove beyond a reasonable doubt that these people are guilty. That's in a nutshell how our criminal justice system works.
Right, right.
So when you look like Waco or Jonesboro, even though it was outside the United States, there's U.S. citizens about. The government gets involved. They look at these things, and they are starting to talk with former members. Now you got actual people coming out and giving you that information. They're making that complaint. They're telling you, hey, there's criminal activity in there. Right. Well, now as law enforcement, whether it's federal, state, or local, you have a duty and obligation to attempt to investigate that.
Right.
And as you saw in both those places I named, as those investigations moved forward and they had the evidence to believe that there was a lot of wrongdoing going on. You had these very charismatic leaders who had these people brainwashed and following them and they do their bidding and do anything they want.
Right.
And of course, in both cases, government intervention resulted in catastrophic endings.
Now, so, do you think that that was the case here? That this was a case of basically brainwashing?
I'm going to avoid talking about that. Let me answer it this way.
Okay.
You have a religious organization. Mm-hmm. They call themselves a Christian church. And yet, within the confines of the sanctuary of that Christian church, the parents, the sister, and other members of that congregation beat two boys so severely that one was dead and the other's been in the hospital for a week. How does that happen? I'm not going to call it anything, but I'm sure you can come up with some words to express.
Read between the lines, basically. Right.
Yeah, in law enforcement, we have to be very careful not to try to label these things. We're not going to call it a cult. We're not going to call it brainwashing. We're going to do a police investigation and say, hey, these people, for whatever reason, collectively got together and did this.
Right.
We'll let a jury decide what to call it.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think everybody's, I still believe this firmly, even though, you go in. And I'm actually a former police chief myself. I had about a 14-year career in law enforcement. So, the probable cause and everything, I get that aspect of it. And even though you guys seem to have an abundance of wrongdoing and evidence or things that point to wrongdoing, I still believe, like you say in the Constitution, that these people are actually innocent until proven guilty, and I think we need to give them that chance. But
absolutely,
right. But at the same time, I think that there's a huge gap, and I think that a lot of or most law enforcement can agree on this. There's a huge gap between people like David Koresh and Jim Jones and all these leaders that you mentioned, and the incidents that have actually come about, as far as the mass killings and suicides and things like that. And that's something that's kind of it's muddy water, and it's one of those gray areas where it's something that we really can't do much about, but we know that something needs to be done about it. So
look at it this way. Obviously, right now, our country is in the midst of dealing with radicalized Muslim jihadists who believe that it's their duty to kill all the non-believers, including us.
Right.
Now, obviously, I don't believe that was the original intent of Islam. I don't believe that, really, that the founders and keepers of that religion, that's been, their number one priority throughout history. I know there's always been conflicts between Christians and Muslims, but for Christ's sake, there's been conflicts in Ireland for years between Protestants and Catholics, and they're both Christians. So, religious conflict is not new. What I think is new is this extreme radicalization of certain sects of these different religions. Whether you call yourself a Muslim or whether you call yourself a Christian, and you've become radicalized, and your belief system takes you to the point where you feel justified in killing people over your religious beliefs, I think we've got a huge problem.
Right.
And, when did it ever, let's face it, you hear this all the time, more people have been killed in the name of God than any other cause in the world.
And it's 100% true. So
yeah, it's sadly true.
Yeah.
So, I look at certain of these organizations now with the mindset of, hey, this is no different than what we're dealing with right now with these radicalized jihadist Muslim groups.
Right.
They've got individual charismatic leaders who are able to gather together a group of like-minded people who they're able to lead and get absolute dedication and devotion from them, and will do their bidding. And, David Koresh did it, Jim Jones did it, and whoever you want to call that leader of this current Muslim jihadist, let's say it was Osama bin Laden that started it.
Right.
These are just individuals that were able to convince other people that, God's talking to me directly, and He wants us to do this. And, you find people, I always call them lost souls, that are looking, they're not comfortable in your traditional churches, and they're always looking for that one more thing. And then they meet this guy, and, hey, I like what he's saying. But in the end, I believe this absolutely. These individuals that take on these leadership roles, it's really about them. It's really about having that power and control. Let's go right over. I like to even jump over to Charles Manson here for a minute. What was Charles Manson's thing? he got all these people under his control. He got into their heads, and he got them to go out and kill for him. You want to go on a power trip? What greater power trip is that? And it really comes down, I think, about a sense of power and control. Hey, Adolf Hitler got a whole gosh darn country to do it.
And won the election by 90-something% of the vote. So
right.
Yeah. I mean,
it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt to have the ballot box stuff too,
Right. So
there's my history lesson.
Man, I appreciate it, and I'm really grateful for the interview. And man, I wish you guys the best, and our thoughts are with you guys with this tragedy, especially. So if you get anything new, you're more than welcome to call me. Feel free to email me or give me a call on my cell phone, and we'll be glad to keep everyone posted or put out any new information you guys need, whatever we can do to help you out. So.
And that's why I want to get your email, Dustin, because I'm dealing about 120 media outlets right now. Right. So if I can get you an email, then I can put into one email and blast it out, and you all get it. And I invite everybody to call me back at any time for clarification if they have additional questions. But at least I can get the story going in everybody's hands at once. I mean, I've done like 120 interviews this week.
Well, man, you've had a long, rough week, I can tell, and I can only imagine what you guys have been going through, with this. So
it's been an incredible week, but things have gone very well for us in this investigation, and the media's been great. I've formed a lot of bonds with a lot of great people over the week here. People I didn't know before this week, and now we're on first name basis. Everybody's got my cell phone numbers. You got my cell phone number. You got my email address, and you can reach out to me anytime. You call me day and night, and I've answered, and we've talked. So I'll continue to be available to you and the rest of the media until this is over.
Lieutenant, I appreciate it, man. Thanks for your time.
Sure thing, Dustin. You take care.
You too. Thanks.
Bye. Bye.